Hi, genuine today's thought. And today I'm going to do something that I rarely do this. It's about replying to commenters. I get comments to this video. I try it. Now, I will sometimes reply to a commenter in the comments. Somebody complimented me a while ago, and so I put I replied. I said, thank you. Things like that. Sometimes, my policy is that because I have this video, I have this vlog to speak as much as I want on anything I want, so I try to stay out of the comments and let you all discuss issues and go back and forth. And then I like to read the comments and see what people are saying. But every once in a while, I'll get something, a comment that either raises, it could raise an interesting issue or just get some facts so wrong that I have to comment, or sometimes both, which I guess you could call the case this time. Important subject, which is tax cuts, the results of cutting taxes, and being wrong on certain facts. So that's what we'll be doing today. Now, the video in question, the vlog in question, was one I did a few days ago, Reagan on the tax cuts. And I had an actual press conference. Ronald Reagan stated the actual numbers from the year that he was being interviewed, which was 1988, if I recall correctly, and that after his tax cuts, he passed his tax cuts, and as he reported, tax receipts, which they always predict that tax receipts, you'll get less taxes if you cut the rates. You're not cutting taxes, you're cutting the rates. That's very important. When you cut the rates, you get more economic activity. That's been shown over and over again. And Reagan gave the actual figures for that year. After his tax cuts, tax revenues for 1 year went up $31 billion, over $300 billion, but spending went up $100 billion more than that 331. In other words, that there was still a deficit because there was spending. And I'm going to play you a video, it'll be coming up, of Reagan himself in his 1988, I believe, his State of the Union, talking about the deficits, that the deficit actually went down after the tax cuts came in. And then I'll let you hear the whole thing. I'll talk about it in more detail a little bit later. But the most important thing is I'm going to show you I hope to do, if I can find the time, do a comprehensive video. As you know, I have a day job. I have a lot of things. I just kind of do these videos on the fly during the day when I can find a half hour or maybe even an hour to do it. But I'll try to do something in detail with a lot of charts and stuff. But you can look all this stuff up, which is what I do. These are government figures that I give you. And but for today, I'm just going to give you one image that will be as much testimony as one should need about how the Reagan economic policies, including tax rate cuts, worked. Now, let's go. Is there anything else to say? I guess that's enough introduction. So let's go right to the comment, and then I'll talk in more detail. So here it is. Here's the comment. His name is Jared Young, which is nice. Thanks for putting your full name in there, because some people come up with these crazy pseudonyms. Well, I do it too. So, what can I tell you? I'm guilty. Mea culpa. Anyways, here it is. It's wildly, I think you mean, Jared, meant widely, little typo there, so I'm going to use widely. Forgive me for not reading verbatim. It's widely recognized now that Reagan, and by extension trickle-down economics, is a disaster for citizens. This is most obvious when compared to China, who had 50 years of their standard of living increased. And, again, I think you wanted to say increased, not increased. Anyways, who had 50 years of their standard of living increased, and during the same period, American standard of living has decreased. I don't think you wanted the as in there either. Anyways, first of all, the American standard of living did not go down under Reagan. It went up. just as it did under Trump, by the way. But we're talking about Reagan today, and which is why Trump won and why Reagan won. You'll see in this image I'm about to show you. But the point is that first of all, what is the per capita income of China compared to the United States today? Now, the United States, this is for the nearest year I could find was 2023. I guess because 2024 is just over and they haven't published figures yet, still January 2025. Anyways, 2023 per capita U.S. income, $43,289. Okay, $43,289. What was China per capita income in 2023? $5,511. Okay, so it's almost the per capita U.S. income is almost 8 times, right? 7.85 times what the Chinese per capita income is. And China, well, there you go. Those are the numbers. I just looked them up. I got them from the government. You can look them up too. And so there it is. But this idea about increasing 50 times, you have to remember, well, I have to show you this gentleman here. That's Deng Xiaoping, okay? Deng Xiaoping. Now, who was Deng Xiaoping? Deng Xiaoping he was a leader of China after Mao. After Mao died in 1974, and then pretty soon after that, there might have been some other. I think there was somebody between Mao and then Deng. But anyways, why am I showing you? Because of what Deng did. Now, China had a communist economic system, okay? Communist economic system. Everybody was dirt poor. I just showed you now, after this 50 years that Jared is so excited about, per capita income is only up to a little over $5,500, something like that. So you see, but the point is that he said, well, Deng was famous for the statement, "It's glorious to grow rich." Okay, he said that. What he did was he transformed, he introduced economic reforms, otherwise, as we know it in our country, capitalism. Okay, and that's when the economy, the Chinese economy took off. And the point I'm making if you're making, let's say if you're making $1 an hour, let's say you're making $1 an hour, and then suddenly you're making $2 an hour. Well, your income is doubled, okay? Your income is doubled. If you're making $1 a day, if your income is $1 a day and it goes up to $50 a day, okay, well, it's increased 50 times, okay? 50 times, so percentage-wise, yeah, you're right, Jared, but big deal, whoopee. And that's what it is. In China, they are starting from such a low point, but you compare that to Hong Kong, which Hong Kong is very wealthy because it was a British possession until they had a 99-year lease, and I think it was 1989 was when the lease ran out. They gave it back to China. But when you compare Hong Kong, okay, also Chinese people, Hong Kong to mainland China during those same 50 years, and you'll see a big difference it's a difference between capitalism and communism. And China today, they call themselves communists, but they're really, it's a totalitarian dictatorship because economically they're capitalist, except now the problem that they're having now, Xi, the current leader, is he's trying to impose controls on the Chinese economy again, and he's having problems because the economy is slowing down. He's turning away from capitalism. The economy is slowing down. Okay, it's still because again they're starting from such a low point. I think their economic growth last year was something like 5.6%, which would be high for us, but that's low for them because it was growing at 10% and higher in previous years. Again, because they're starting from such a low point. But now, so that was the first part where I just thought the argument was a little silly, and it's because I have this criticism of my Democratic friends a lot, which is failure to look up ism is a failure simply to look up stuff. They just spout narratives without going and getting the figures like I just did. Now, Reagan, as I just said, he he cited the figures, and it was a press conference. Nobody challenged him, and you can look this up too. $331 billion, and Congress spent more. And that is a problem why these tax increases, when the taxes go up, that the deficit continues to go up. It's because Congress always spends the money, but that's another story for another day. But now what I want to get to is, Jared's picture that I just, in that comment I show you, it's actually two gentlemen standing next to each other. An older gentleman, not as old as I am, I think. I'm 72, but a younger man, and I'm assuming that, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, in the comments, I'm assuming that you are the younger man in that photo. In other words, somebody who did not actually live, as I did, through the Reagan years and through the Carter years before that. So I wonder if you've heard of something called the misery index. Okay, you don't hear about it anymore, precisely because of Reagan. But the misery index it came up during the Carter years. And it was simply the rate of inflation plus the unemployment rate. And it was up to 17 or 18. That was the misery index under Carter. About 13%, actually was higher than that. But it was to be conservative, 13% inflation and 5% unemployment, which would be 18. But I might be thinking of this is how bad it was in those days. I had a 5-year CD like you get in the bank today, and they pay, 1%, 2%, or whatever it is. I had one that paid 13%. That's how bad inflation was in those days. So if my CD was 13%, inflation had to be higher. I'm not going to look it up. But anyways, after Reagan, you didn't hear about the misery index anymore because there wasn't any misery. And now we get to the photo. Well, I have two images to show you, and first one, with the preliminary one, and then this big one that I've been promising you. So we just had, one of the biggest factors in any election, any presidential election, is the performance of the economy. If the economy does bad, then, as we just saw, the incumbent president or the party in power loses. And if the economy is great, then that person wins. If it's bad, then that party loses and the other party wins. Either way, whether Republican, whoever the economy does worse under. Okay, does that make any sense? It's like Reagan asked, this is important. This is the 80 election after Carter. So he was running, and he famously asked, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Basically, he asked that, and the answer was obvious, and Carter lost. Now, Trump asked the very same question: are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? If we actually were, then Biden would have won. If we were not, then Trump would have won. And Democrats, they don't want to admit this, but this was the second time in our history, the Grover Cleveland, have to go all the way back to Grover Cleveland, 1889, I think it was, to have where a president lost an election, a first-term president lost the election, and then 4 years later came back and won because the president in between, the president who won the first one, did so badly. So now this was only the second time in history, and it was a referendum on both. When you have a situation like that, you are able to take Trump's first term, Biden's first term, and compare them. And obviously the comparison showed that we were better off under Trump. That's obvious after the Trump tax cuts, and revenues are up. You can look it up in a table. I may save this for another vlog, but these are easily, you can look up and see what tax receipts are today compared to what they were when in 2018. Tax receipts today are higher than they were in 2018, period. They just are. And they're higher today, obviously, than they were when JFK, who I'll also be getting to in this vlog, when he cut taxes. And you have to remember that Clinton cut taxes and Kennedy cut taxes. Theory, actually, it was, Kennedy unfortunately was assassinated, so it was under Johnson that the tax cuts actually happened, but they really were the Kennedy tax cuts. And Harding cut taxes is all the way back to the 1920s. And well, you just look when Kennedy proposed his tax cuts, the top rate was 90%. It's not 90% today. When Reagan proposed his, it was 70%. It's not anything close to that. And are revenues up or are they down? They're up. Okay, so we're below 90%, we're below 70%, and revenues are up. Okay, so there's more evidence. But as I was saying, an election is a referendum on the president's performance and his party's performance. And and I just showed you, if the economy was bad, then Biden would have. If the economy was really great, Biden would have won. Okay, Trump won, and I want to show you now two images: preliminary image and the second image. Okay, which is the big Boffo image that I'm going to get to. But this is just we just had an election. This is the 2024 electoral map after the election. As you can see, Trump, well, we all know he won the Electoral College, he won all the swing states, he won the popular vote, and nobody is arguing that was not a landslide. That was a landslide. But, if you saw that scene from, I never saw the whole movie, but they've shown the clip on YouTube, Crocodile Dundee. He's in New York. He's in New York, and he's with his girlfriend or whatever. And he's in an alley, and this a thug, robber, comes up and he waves this little penknife and says, your money, give me all your money, or I'll stick you with my knife or whatever. And Crocodile Dundee says, "You call that a knife?" And he says, "This is a knife," and he pulls out this giant Bowie knife. Okay, and the guy runs off. The thug runs off. Okay, well, I just showed you the Trump landslide, and so paraphrasing Crocodile Dundee, you call that a landslide? This is a landslide. That is the electoral map of 1984, Reagan's second election. He was first elected 1980. This was 1984. Reagan over 500 electoral votes. Mondale only 13 electoral votes from one state, and that state, as you can probably guess, that was Mondale's home state. Walter Mondale's home state. And that's the only state he could carry. So now, it's a little common sense here, my Democratic friends. If we did not have an economic boom under Reagan, then would he have won that big a victory, historic, every state but one, 49 states, if the economy were that bad? And I can tell you now, as I said, I think Mr. Young Jared, may I call you Jared? You can call me Gene, if I can call you Jared. Yeah, well, I guess I already have. But I said, you look like you were too young to have lived through those years. But I lived through those years, and I can tell you from personal experience how my income was, that those were boom years. That was an enormous boom. That was his campaign slogan when Reagan won. Morning in America, because he inherited this horrible misery index, this horrible recession under Carter. And by the way, rest in peace, President Carter. His funeral was today, the day I'm recording this, the day before you're seeing it. And he inherited a disaster, Reagan did. And just 4 years later, Morning in America, you saw, you can go, I'm not going to put it up, you can look at the 1980 electoral map where Reagan did almost as good, and that was because of how bad the economy and how bad the whole country was, actually. I don't want to go I just don't want to relive those memories. I lived through those too, the Carter years. And actually, it was Reagan made me, I'm an independent now, but it was Reagan who made me a Republican. I voted mea culpa, Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program. Gene Schwimmer voted for Jimmy Carter. I voted for him in 1980, okay? Carter versus Ford. I voted for Carter, and boy, do I regret it. I regret it. And, well, the whole country did, and they voted for Reagan. So there you go. But I'm going to now show you, that was the big Bafo image, that it just doesn't make sense that Reagan would have lost. And I'm using that as a shorthand. Maybe, as I said, I'll do maybe another vlog someday where I'll put up graphs and charts and everything. But it was an economic boom. I'll throw you in another anecdote, okay? Taxes were so low. I did my taxes one year, and they were so low that they were almost zero. And I felt, which is another thing people don't understand, when you lower taxes, people don't cheat, okay, on their taxes. Not only did I cheat, I actually felt guilty one year under Reagan. I said, no, I got to pay something. That's not enough. And I had all these deductions, and I started removing deductions, okay? Deductions I could have taken, but I didn't take because I wanted to pay. And that's what happens when you have low taxes. People are happy to pay taxes. And if you lower taxes, there's a point where you can lower them where people would pay more than they would officially owe if they could afford it. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else, but I can speak for myself because I did it. Now, I'm going to show you now. This is Reagan in his 1988, which I believe would have been his last State of the Union, okay? So State of the Union in front of all of Congress and talking again about what happened. Now, I talked before about tax receipts going up, and you'll hear him right now that after the tax cut came in, that the deficit went down. The deficit went down after the Reagan tax cuts, and he had plans for the next fiscal year where if they kept these policies in, they were predicting another decrease in the deficit. But he put a warning. He said, but Congress, you have to, don't go back to your old habits. If you do that, then the deficit's going to go up again. And of course, that's what happened. And here's Reagan. You can hear him right now. And then I have one more after this of Kennedy, JFK, John F. Kennedy, calling for tax cuts and arguing the logic and wisdom of tax cuts.
Yes, we Americans like the future and like making the most of it. Let's do that now. And let's begin by discussing how to maintain economic growth by controlling and eventually eliminating the problem of federal deficits. We have had a balanced budget only 8 times in the last 57 years. For the first time in 14 years, the federal government spent less in real terms last year than the year before. We took $73 billion off last year's deficit compared to the year before. The deficit itself has moved from 6.3% of the gross national product to only 3.4%. And perhaps the most important sign of progress has been the change in our view of deficits. You know, a few of us can remember when, not too many years ago, those who created the deficits said they would make us prosperous and not to worry about the debt because we owe it to ourselves. Well, at last, there is agreement that we can't spend ourselves rich. Our recent budget agreement, designed to reduce federal deficits by $76 billion over the next 2 years, builds on this consensus. But this agreement must be adhered to without slipping into the errors of the past. More broken promises and more unchecked spending. As I indicated in my first State of the Union, what ails us can be simply put. The federal government is too big and it spends too much money.
If you don't want to listen to me, if you don't want to listen to Reagan, if you don't want to listen to a Republican, you can listen to a Democrat. Here is JFK.
The worst deficit comes from a recession. And if we can take the proper action in the proper time, this can be the most important step we could take to prevent another recession. That is the right kind of a tax cut, both for your family budget and the national budget, resulting from a permanent basic reform and reduction in our rate structure, a creative tax cut, creating more jobs and income, and eventually more revenue. And the right time for that kind of bill, it now appears, in the absence of an economic crisis today, and if the job is to be done in a responsible way, is January 1963. Such a bill will be presented to the Congress for action next year. It will include an across-the-board, top-to-bottom cut in both corporate and personal income taxes. It will include long-needed tax reform that logic and equity demand. And it will date that cut in taxes to take effect as of the start of next year, January 1963. The billions of dollars this bill will place in the hands of the consumer and our businessmen will have both immediate and permanent benefits to our economy. Every dollar released from taxation that is spent or invested will help create a new job and a new salary. And these new jobs and new salaries can create other jobs and other salaries, and more customers and more growth for an expanding American economy. Instead of being permanently saddled with excess planned capacity and the budgetary deficit that is created by this means, our goal must be full capacity and full employment and the budgetary surpluses that that kind of employment and capacity can produce.
And that's it. I guess this was a long one today. I hope you stuck around for the whole thing. I hope it was worth it. And that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Comments always welcome in the comments section. Most likely I won't comment on them in a video, but you never know. And I think I just said if you could subscribe, that would really be great. Share this video with anyone you think could benefit from it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.